Modified May 2nd.
Just don't you ask.
Not before it released.
Okay, then.
Hello, everybody. Please let us know if you can't hear us or see us. Well, if you can't see us and you can't hear us, you don't know what I just said. So that might not be important, but it might be. Probably someone will say something if they can't hear us. Yeah. All right. So anyway, we are Schell Games. We're a game studio in Pittsburgh. We decided to do occasional dinners where we eat food and talk about game dev, and hopefully answer some of your questions and get to know some of you, and we have a good time and all that stuff. So I'm going to sit down in my quiet spot.
Quiet spot.
I'm Mike, by the way. I'm a engineer here, and I will let everyone else introduce themselves. I guess we'll start with you, Tim, because you're on that side of the table.
Hello, my name is Tim Roscoe. I am a sound designer and composer here at Schell Games. I make the beeps and the boops and other stuff too.
I'm Max. I'm an engineer here. I do mainly gameplay programming and tools type programming. It's good stuff.
Hi, I'm Greg. I do the same thing that Max does.
Just in fewer words.
That's right.
Hi, I'm Dan. I'm a game artist. I'm a generalist, so I dabble in a lot of things, but
You said it feels like
generally focused on visual effects and some other stuff. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm the other Tim in this room, Tim Sweeney. I'm a technical designer and project director here. So I do a lot of nuts and bolts design and get people on board with decisions and say really pithy, inspirational speeches at the drop of a hat.
It's pretty inspirational.
Very inspired.
Yes.
I need one.
An inspirational speech?
Yeah, my project, we're struggling.
There's a YouTube video.
Really?
It has 80 it's a supercut of 80 inspirational speeches.
All by you?
No, from various movies and films, and it'll just jump like one from another, like this inspirational speech from this movie, this speech from this movie, and it's amazing because it just takes you with it as you go through it. I must have used it like 5 or 6 times in my development career. I just show that to the team, and they're all like, "Whatever you just said, we're totally good for it. Yeah, yeah."
I love it.
Hi, Cog Brown. We are humans. Humans who are here.
The volume is getting better.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been making adjustments.
Adjustments.
All right, so I did ask people in advance to send some questions in, so I'm going to start with the questions that we've already got. But if you're watching live, go ahead and type questions into the little chat window that you're already using to tell us that we're too quiet and all that. And we hope to get to everyone's questions. I doubt it's that crowded, so I'm sure we'll get to your questions. But I will start with the first question tonight, which I will also copy in the chat.
I don't know, Google account, anonymous Google account.
Okay, so question number 1. Given a hypothetical scenario where you have unlimited time, budget, and resources, what is the one game you would make? Right, and we'll all answer the question in turn because we got time.
Unlimited time and budget.
Unlimited everything.
You don't limit anything on the game.
Don't start with me. I need time.
I know what I would make.
Do it.
I would make a AAA quality foliage VR gardening game.
Oh, nice.
Where you've got crazy dirt physics. Everything is bespoke and like handcrafted dirt, and then you've got plants too, also handcrafted and bespoke. And then they waft gently in the breezes, and it's just like great lighting, and it's just all of the fun of gardening without any of the being dirty or being outside. That would be my dream game.
It's like a biology simulator too, where it like actually grows in real time.
Not in real time. That takes too long. But yeah.
It's probably I'm getting trapped by the open-endedness of the question. Right. I'm thinking about like my game project would be entitled Universal Basic Income, and my staff would be the planet, and we wouldn't really have any goals or direction.
You know,
But I think everybody would really enjoy it, nonetheless.
Sounds like everyone would benefit.
I would play that game.
Sounds like a
You
meta
would
game.
develop for that game.
I would work.
And
work
we
hard
would
to play
all
that.
dog food it. Right? It would be great. But
What's going on in here?
It's
Got
the-
another
The
guy?
stream.
Oh,
Hey.
sweet.
How's it going?
I meant to sign up, but then I.
That's cool. No, you just signed up.
Did you just
signed up,
walk
go out
in
the
here?
door, grab something to eat.
What?
There's food?
Yeah,
There's
there's
food.
food.
You did that on purpose.
I did now, yeah.
just botched the camera.
That was an accident. Wants to know if Jesse is going to show up. Jesse is always
Yeah.
invited, but I'm not sure. He's also extremely busy, so I don't know if he's going to pop in or not. So stay tuned and hope for the best. And I think also Jesse might be using the name Google account right now to demand Toontown 2 and because that's that's a joke, everybody.
There's just a lot
There are a
of
lot of jokes
there are
coming
a
from
lot
Google
of
account.
Toontown fans.
If I had unlimited time, budget, and resources, what would I do? Some kind of crazy, stupid RPG, because RPGs are always overscoped and over budgeted, and never have enough resources. So, if I have unlimited, why not? Like, just do an RPG, and you'd probably be able to actually achieve it.
Yeah, you can ship it on time.
Yeah, ship it on
I
time.
mean, I think the problem with unlimited budget is maybe the game will never get done.
Right.
Oh, that's absolutely true. What's and time too? Like, given unlimited time, I would never finish a game.
So, are you like going into like a pocket dimension and then you emerge with the game, I guess?
Yeah, just bury me with my laptop.
I'm probably overthinking this.
If I had unlimited time and money, I'd retire.
That doesn't sound that fun of a game.
Game of life.
What's the new content? We can't tell you
It's
that.
fun if you have infinite money.
Polish Paul, VR, your PS VR dude.
It's great though.
It is
Yeah, we
great.
can't. I don't think we are supposed to tell you what the new content is, but we can tell you that there is going to be new content, and it is going to be really good.
Yeah.
Oh, one more thing. You will be playing as a telekinetic spy.
Whoa.
Oh,
It's true.
Changing it up.
that's so exciting.
No, it's
Google account.
Too much.
I'm not sure if that's a serious question or not, but yes, I do.
Unless they're not vegetarian, then no.
It's true.
Yeah, it could be like.
I love
meat
animal
cow
crackers.
Or something.
No, because they're cookies.
What would a non-vegetarian animal cracker be? Like a meat animal cracker? That doesn't sound good.
so
It'd be like cracker jerky or something.
it's not like chicken and a biscuit, which actually has no chicken.
What?
You've
What?
never heard of chicken and a biscuit?
No.
I have.
The crackers.
Imagine.
crackers.
So you ever have ramen when you have like that package of bouillon and
Mhm.
seasoning?
Sure.
Somebody said, if we took a cracker and dusted it with that seasoning, we could sell that.
Isn't that like 50% MSG?
And that's chicken
MSG
and a
makes
biscuit.
things taste good.
Yeah, so.
What's
No,
the hardest
that's
part
an accent. Wait.
of making a game in terms of the game engine?
Yeah, so it depends on what type of game you're doing. In VR, there's definitely always a lot of like conflicts between the game engine and the operating system you're using and the hardware and like all the things that are trying to connect to each other
Mm-hmm.
at like at an OS level. I think for me, in my personal experience, physics is the most difficult thing to go around. So we use Unity a lot, and Unity uses, I believe, PhysX 2.8.
Some physics.
Some version of PhysX that's optimized for like thousands of objects interacting with each other at once, but not necessarily optimized for a single object interacting with another
Floor.
single object.
Like a floor, for instance.
Yeah. So like, for instance, in I Expect You to Die, there's some clipping issues and things of that nature, and in the game engine, there generally isn't enough information when objects collide to actually know what to do with them. So, like for instance, it used to be the case that in I Expect You to Die, when you try to push one object into another object with your hand, the object in your hand would drop out. Like let's say you tried to push the squeegee or the sponge through a window. in the window washing level, whatever that level is called. We call it window washing level.
Squeaky clean.
Yeah, squeaky clean, right. So, it used to drop out of your hands, and the way that I knew to actually do that was if on collide, the resultant, you would think it would be a resultant velocity, but it's actually, what's more accurate would be the resultant rotational change, like angular velocity change, is like some value that I hard-coded in. I think it was like 638
Classic
meters
638.
per second.
638. Everybody write that
That
down.
universal constant, I think that was in one of Einstein's equations, 638 for rotations.
So, I mean, that's just one instance of like, the physics engine doesn't give you useful information. Because the other numbers were pseudo-random, sometimes give me 0 even, which is wrong. So.
But like you said, Andreas, physics is kind of super important with this with VR nowadays. It does feel fake. If you don't have physics or you can't interact with the world around you, then you feel like you're not immersed, and that is no fun.
Sometimes you have to fake physics to make it feel real.
Yeah, so you gotta fake the physics. Because real physics is not as enjoyable as fake physics.
Can anyone think of an
Sometimes.
example of a time that you had to fake physics? Something that is
I mean,
better fake than real?
I cannot talk about my current projects, but there is physics fakery going on. Definitely. So, yes. Just sometimes, the physics is doing too much, way more than you need it to, so you're better off just controlling the interactions that you want to think about, and then just making sure that they are 100% consistent when you need them to be.
There was an R&D project I was working on about 2 years ago to make a virtual reality board game. This was 2 years ago, okay? And I was making Settlers of Catan just because it was an R&D project, so we would never release it. And I had to write physics for like shaking dice in your hand. So you pick it up with your hand and do this thing where the dice had to be like confined to this invisible hand inner sphere, and like also hit each other. And then when the dice hit the table, because like the bounce effect of a dice gives it that like dice feel, right? And in Unity by default, like when you like throw a cube like at the ground or something, even if it has like a physics material on it, it won't like spin wildly like a real dice would. So I had to fake that as well. And it felt pretty good at the time.
Basically, anytime anything in a game feels good, someone has gone into it and hacked it to make it feel good.
Probably true.
They did not rely on the physics engine.
Yeah, that's for sure.
The question went from riddles to just direct question.
All right, so we're gonna move past Jesse's question. But so the next question that was pre-submitted, how do you actually start making a game? I know the tools, etc., but actually starting to make the game is hard. I
For
think
sure.
what they're getting at is how do you get a game idea, maybe, to make this more concrete. But feel free to answer this in any way that you want. But I guess, how would you start making a game?
You gotta start somewhere.
I think when I first started making
Great
games,
advice. Thank you.
it was mostly like after I made something, it's like, oh, I can make something. I'm just gonna go ahead and make things, and after that, it wasn't that hard. But maybe just coming up with the idea itself. I think there are lots of ways you could come up with certain ideas. Usually, you can play to your strengths. Like if you have a music background, maybe it can be a music game. If you like puzzle games, you maybe start off with a small puzzle game, etc. You could always also just clone a game like Pong or Flappy Bird, whatever. If you don't have any ideas, just to get that experience of programming or something like that.
I do think it's important when you are starting out to not try to create an entire game. Like, you're not going to be able to code Morrowind just at the beginning, but you've got to figure out what is the first thing that you are going to get in. What is either the core mechanic or the system or the prototype that you want to test out, where you can say, okay, this is small enough that I can accomplish it in a reasonable amount of time, and then reassess or go on to the next thing. a lot of what I'm finding in making games is figuring out which is the first thing to start on, and then finishing that, and then figuring out what to do next. And that's super important for making a game, because especially if you're trying to make something large and complicated, it can be intimidating. So just figuring out something small to start with, and then going on from there is, I think, the most important thing for starting to make a game.
Here's an example from a game jam that I did with some friends. We didn't really have an idea, but it was a game. It was a global game jam, so there was a theme that we were trying to fit into. But basically, we didn't have any idea going in. So what we did was, instead of trying to, come up with some elaborate game idea, we just tried to make an interaction that was fun. So in that case, it was just like as simple as literally just typing letters. But once you get that going and you can get something functioning like, hey, I press K and a K shows up on the screen, then you try something different. Like, what if I change the color of that? Now it's red. Okay, when it's red, what do I do? Starting with just a simple idea and then trying to find the fun of that one idea. For that example, we ended up making this typing game where if it was red, you did the opposite, and if it was green, you did what it said. So you do like left arrow, green, then you press the left arrow, red, you press the right arrow. And it was a super simple interaction, like probably the simplest thing you could do. But it ended up being, we made a little bite-sized chunk of that seemed fun enough. And then as we started playing with that idea more, we could develop it out, and that's kind of how that game came into being. But we didn't really have some big plan set in stone or anything. It was just a...
So you had no plan, and you went to this thing called a game jam?
Yeah. Global game jam.
Yeah,
Global
but
game jam?
even for like larger projects, internally we kind of shoot for something that we like to call the MVP, minimum viable product. And for that, you kind of decide what is the least amount of work you can do to get something that's playable. It doesn't necessarily have to reflect the end vision for your game. Like if you're making an FPS, then the first thing you want to do is you want to get a guy moving around in the world, right? And this is like before you think about shooting a gun or something like that. And then you add like the next like phase of your MVP. Like, oh, okay, so there's an FPS, we have a guy walking around. Now we want him to be able to shoot stuff. So you add like the gun and the ability to shoot and things like that. And really, you have to break down the problem into really small chunks that are easy to solve, right? Like you can think of your game as like a jigsaw puzzle, kind of. And you work on one piece at a time. And once your pieces all connect, then you have a beautiful picture, right?
Supposedly.
Yeah, that's not the greatest analogy. More like a 3D jigsaw Inception MC Escher thing, but
I think it's sort of like building a house. The MVP is going to be the beams that hold up the house. It's going to be, you can't start putting things on the walls before you have walls, and you can't put up your walls before you know they're going to hold up the roof. So part of it is a little bit of experience allows you to make those calls of like, this is the thing that is more important than, polishing up the particle effects when you fire a gun, for instance. So it's a lot of it is trying to figure out what is going to be the load-bearing systems that I need to start writing. And for like an FPS, it's movement and then it's gun combat, and then everything else it's sort of downhill from there. That's the decorating of the walls. That is the putting windows where they belong and all that stuff.
yeah, you'll want to do that even before you attempt something like multiplayer.
Yeah.
Because you want to get a good feel for an individual character before you add the other ones. And like.
Unrelated, Google account. This past 4th of July, found an 8-pack of hot dogs and an 8-pack of hot dog buns.
Wow.
They are changing.
Crazy.
The world is changing. It was crazy. I was fully expecting to have an uneven number.
Where did you
And there
find
were
that?
8 and 8. At the grocery store.
My goodness.
It was
Which
absurd.
grocery store?
Piggly Wiggly in Birmingham, Alabama.
Nice.
No Piggly Wigglies up here.
I was like, what?
Sorry. Just side note, but I thought that was interesting.
Also,
Well, actually, Tim, since you brought it up, I think since we have game system designers here, there might actually be I think it's kind of an interesting question. Why would hot dogs come 10 to a package and buns only 8? I mean, I can think of some reasons.
To teach you math.
It's a teachable moment.
No, it's a sad fact that most places in the world that are selling products don't have a focus on the consumer experience, the guest experience.
Don't communicate to each other.
So what they've said is, it's not that they haven't communicated with each other, it's that that's one source of confusion, right? But since it's been going on for many years, there has to be some sort of deliberateness to it. And the answer that I've heard several times is kind of a cynical one, is that since you always wind up with an uneven set, you're constantly incentivized to purchase
Buy
more.
more.
Of
I mean,
the type you don't
money is a
have.
pretty underlying reason for a lot of things, unfortunately.
I
So,
think it's just a margin
capitalism.
of error, you know? Like, if I'm cooking 10 hot dogs, I'll probably mess up 2. but
Hot
I
dogs,
won't-
very difficult to
I
prepare.
won't mess
What?
up the buns, you know?
Or
You
maybe
mess
a
up
dog
too?
will get. A
Yeah,
dog will
I
come
don't
up
like
with
it when a dog splits. You know
You're
what I mean?
saying that you're somehow going to make a hot dog so bad that it's unworthy of a bun twice.
Potentially.
No, well, the thing is, like,
Yeah.
if you do have a dog, you should feed it some hot dogs, but you shouldn't give it any buns.
Yeah, the bread is
So
bad.
it works out.
Why is that?
Polish Paul.
Is that true?
I like
you
his
don't feed
idea,
bread
too.
to dogs
What is
or
it?
cats, right?
Just in case if you slip out of your hands, you can have food to spare. They
Yeah,
are.
Also, Polish Paul, to answer one of your earlier questions, PC is definitely easier to develop for than PSVR. The PSVR has a lot of weird restrictions there in documentation that you don't really find out about until you're working on it. And a lot of those documentation is in Japanese. And so,
That makes it tough.
yeah. Like, for instance, it used to be the case that in a loading screen, or that your game could never fall below a certain FPS, frames per second, I should say, in the headset, because that'll create a bad experience for the user. They might get sick. But this includes the loading screens, which is when you're loading things and, like, you know, when you're loading like textures and stuff into like the GPU RAM, like that's a blocking operation. You can't really do much about that, depending on the game engine you're using. But that aside, yeah, never mind.
Also, PCs are easier to develop for because you are using a PC to develop, or we do here. So, like, you don't have to push it to your PS4 dev kit, any of that stuff. It's just sort of, if you want to see how it will build, you build it, and then you just run it on the computer, which is nice.
Don't hit us though.
So I sense we're ready for another question,
Just
so I've got a
yes.
good one from the pre-question area, pre-question zone. What are some ideas / concepts you wish would be explored in video games that are never explored or underexplored? Mechanics, story elements, art style, social issues, types of games, etc. So whatever you think. What would you guys like to see more of in games?
Universal basic income, right?
Besides that, we covered that already.
Jobs programs for developers? No. Oh gosh.
I don't know.
Underexplored.
A
I
lot of
think
people making
I want to be
lots of games.
surprised, so
Yeah.
I can't know beforehand.
I feel like
Interesting.
there need to be more games where people shoot each other. I don't know if there are enough of those. Wait, hold on. Let me think for a second. No, wait, there are definitely enough of those. Probably something else.
Second person shooter? Should we have that discussion in front of people?
Second person shooter?
Probably not.
Tim, shoot.
No, we did have a concept of a second person shooter that I don't know if we ever prototyped it or we just bandied it about, but the idea was like you would see everything through the eyes of someone you were trying to kill.
That is,
It's weird.
that's like some art game stuff.
I don't know if it's a good idea or not, but I know it was an idea we had once.
Yeah, I don't know. I think there are a lot of people trying to make more games that tackle difficult social issues, especially indie developers, but they're not always successful. Sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. I think there's a delicate line, much like educational games or transformational games. There's a delicate line between being too heavy-handed and not fun anymore, and being like fun, but also makes you think and changes your perspective. So I'd love to see that done well. I think, we have a few standouts, but it's still a space where not a lot of people are like trying to do it artfully.
Maybe in that sense, like,
I don't know.
there's a lot of games where, all the pieces work together pretty well. But then once you add in, like, a message or
Yeah.
something to learn, that's still getting, I mean, I'm sure there are some games that do that pretty well, but
Yeah.
fewer.
I think it's a lot of it's just the expense, right?
Yeah.
I've seen many people just dash off something on Twitter or dash off something on Tumblr or create a little image or create a little story in those mediums, and that can change hearts and minds, and
Mhm.
try to express that as a game and get that same level of push into the soul. I mean, okay, how much money you got, how much
Right.
time you got, how much investment you got, like, it can be very taxing.
Mhm.
In terms of stuff that's underexplored, I would love to see a world where people feel as comfortable dashing off a short micro game as they would one of those memes, right? Like a world where people can express themselves very fluidly with very light interactivity. And I've seen people like do things like this, using engines like Twine. Like in Twine, and like you have 30 minutes, you can write a little choose your own adventure interaction in Twine and just publish it to the web. But like that's just tip of the iceberg for that sort of thing.
I would like to see a game that's kind of like, so we see a lot of games that are similar to or mimicking like Skyrim / feel, right? This open world RPG with like real-time combat and things like that. And we see a lot of games that are MMOs where it's kind of like, this fake real-time combat with like just numbers, and like if someone took like the server idea behind like Diablo 2 and then applied it to a game like Skyrim, where you're not it's like not this massively multiplayer online game, but instead the world instance is shared between 4 people and they can play together, that would be really solid.
Someone is working on a multiplayer mod for Skyrim.
Yes.
Wasn't there a
It's been in the
multiplayer?
works for like 7 years.
Yeah.
Wasn't there a multiplayer mod in the work for like Morrowind before then too? I feel like there's always been scuttlebutt of like modders trying to make a game in an old engine, go single player game, trying to make it multiplayer, and seems hard.
Yeah, it seems really hard. Yeah.
Just have local ones.
How cool
Yeah, that makes it easy, right?
Pretty cool.
I guess Minecraft does this.
Yeah.
But I don't play Minecraft.
Well,
How much do you want that kind of game really?
I'm above Minecraft.
you're above Minecraft?
Yeah.
Just because they're mining underground.
We just lost all of our viewers.
Oh.
Sorry, no, I mean, it's fine.
Yeah, that shared open world experience. Yeah, I can't imagine anything superior to Minecraft in that exact space these days. It really is super open-ended, and people have been able to do all sorts of different things in that space, and it's very inherently, people do that, it's collaborative, imaginative play.
I guess games are starting to come out like that. There's like Ark, right? Or not Ark, but something.
The dinosaur game?
Yeah.
Ark Survival, isn't it?
Yeah.
Ars Fatalis, is that one?
And then there's
That's
things
something
like
else.
there's this game where like you collectively build a house to defend against zombies. That's not quite out yet. But it's not quite the same, right? Because like those games are like open-ended and don't have a story, and then the Elder Scrolls universe has like a full depth of story and lore.
Mythology.
Yeah. And the things like, as a character in that game, the things you're doing matter. They impact the world, and people, like the NPCs, will even talk about it. And that feels really powerful to me. Because I can't generate my own motivation.
So it's a big question, but we can try to answer Gary, I'm sorry, I'm gonna skip over your last name, but Gary's question.
Lombaxki.
I've played big games such as Wizard 101 and Toontown. How exactly do you go about making games like these? I know you need program, but what else do you exactly need? It seems very complicated. Yes.
I'll step in. You
Please.
need a team.
There you go.
You need a studio. You need, basically, you can't possibly do something like that by yourself.
Unless
So-
it's incredibly scoped down and somewhat.
But then it's
You
not
can't
the
make
thing
something
that you
good.
said. You can't make
Yeah.
something big by yourself if it's like the first step on a lot of those things is figuring out the people that you're going to work with,
Yeah.
whether it's your team or your studio or how much money you have. So that's kind of how big you can go.
Every project that I've worked on at the studio so far, the smallest team was, I think, 4 people. And then we add on more people as we need them. So, for instance, we had artists who were working on 2D art, and maybe we know beforehand all of the images that we need them to make. So we bring them on for a week, 2 weeks, for enough time for them to make it. We put it in the game, see if anything is working, and then we say, okay, cool, and then they can go on to other projects. But the games that I make, again, I'm in the engineering side, so I work very closely with the designers who are trying to make the content. They will have an idea for how something works, or they'll see something we have already built and will come to me and they'll say, Max, I want to be able to do this over here instead of the way that it's implemented already. So that's something where alone I would probably not have thought about that. Usually when I am writing the code to make the game stuff happen, I'm doing my best, right? I'm thinking like, oh, this is how it should work. And it requires someone else with a different perspective, someone who is not as deep in the code base, to look at it from an outside perspective and be like, you know what, I think it needs this. And then we have the same interaction with the artist, where like I might be playing through the game after implementing something, and I'll be like, you know what, this is working the way I want it to, but we can't really communicate that well. We might need to bring in our effects artists or our UI artists, or our 3D modelers. We might go back to them and say, hey, can we change this thing up on the rig, or like change up an animation? So essentially, like Tim said, we need a team. We need a lot of people who are specialized in a lot of different disciplines. And then there needs to be a lot of communication between all of these disparate people trying to make this good game, because while they are good at doing the thing that they have been hired to do, they will probably see things that they are not equipped to be able to solve. They will see problems that they can bring back to the team, and then the team can collectively find solutions and move forward.
Yes.
In short, you need programmers, artists, designers,
Producers.
and audio people.
Great answer.
Yes.
Probably.
And you could learn all those things by yourself and maybe get a game done in like 20
5
years or 10 years, you know, if it's like a really big game. Or you can find people who can do it better than you and work with them.
Yeah.
That's true.
And
Even
if you-
for something like that, I would think you would want more than one programmer, probably. Someone to handle
Oh yeah.
the server side of making an MMO.
Yeah, I think the most difficult part is that, because like, you know, when you have an MMO, like you need to rely on a clustered servers setup, which means that information about the world is contained in multiple locations simultaneously, and those locations may not necessarily know what each other knows. And that's kind of how like the cluster works, right? I mean,
Is this
No.
a metaphor for interdisciplinary teams, or are you literally
no,
talking
this is
about-
literally like I'm talking about like, well, I guess like Memcache solves some of that, but okay, never mind, guys. Yeah.
Well,
Now
you're
I'm
gonna need a big
confused.
IT department to run all your servers, and you're gonna suddenly need
Oh, yeah.
a bunch of ops staff to support your office.
As you can see, Gary, this is a very, very big question. So we can't really say how exactly we go about making games like this, but if you have more specific questions, we would be happy to answer those as well.
Your game requires lots of skills, so
Fair enough.
you'll need a team to do those skills, or you'll need to be yourself like the Batman of game development, who just learns every skill secretly in training.
Yeah, and that takes like 15
Years
years.
of study.
Like a long
How
time.
long has Batman been being Batman? Like 80 years? 90
Yeah.
years now?
Yeah, and he's
It's
not
been a
perfect.
while.
Yeah.
Well, it
Like,
takes-
he's not even the best Batman.
That's right.
Takes 10 years to master a skill, right? So 10 years for each discipline.
So yeah, so when you're 50, you can make your own game and it'll just take you 20 years.
They say that muscle memory activates after 1,500 repetitions. So if you make 1,500 games, you can just do
Then
it
you just start
without
making,
thinking
you'll
about
just
it.
start making that much.
I thought it's just
forever.
1,500 times pressing the Q key, 1,500 times pressing the W key.
Well, let's not get too specific.
Alright, so, next question, and just so folks know, as you're asking questions, I'm writing them down and so I can feed them back to the group, so we're trying not to lose too much. So go ahead and keep them coming. How do you determine how many games a year you need to make? Pretty broad question, but always something on my mind since I like making one really good game than many smaller games.
We need to make enough games a year that we can afford rent and food.
Oh, jeez. So dark. Oh.
Or you don't have to eat, Tim, that's fine.
I mean, we do a mix of client originated projects. We do a mix of client projects that we pitched to clients in response to vague or general requests for things that we come up with creatively and then pitch it back and they say, that's amazing, you should go do that. And then there's a couple of things we do, like I Expect You to Die, which are originated here, and then we build it out. How many do we do a year?
Depends on the year.
Yeah.
Depends on the year. If people are paying us to make lots of big, super awesome things, we do that because we love doing awesome work. And if we wind up with a lot of that, the studio was not always this exact size. Like, the studio grows as time passes and different stuff happens.
And we should also say that not everything that we are working on inside of the studio is necessarily a game. The project that I'm working on now, I can say that it is a game. The one I was working on before was more of like a experimental research type thing, something that was never meant for public consumption. It was just to prove out concepts for clients. So, you know, there is a mix of that, but how many games did we release last year?
It's like,
Like
A lot.
400, like
Stupid number.
70,000,
Yeah.
like a couple dozen at least, right?
Quite a few.
A
Yeah,
dozen.
You know, in the thousands.
Yeah. Yeah, the low thousands.
so I think like something that that's like really hard to grasp until you're in the industry is operational costs. Like, you'll see on like Kickstarter, some guy will be like, yeah, I'm living in my mom's basement and I can knock this game out for, say, $20,000, which will fund me for the next
Oh
2
my
years
God.
or something, right? But when you're working in a larger studio like ours, like, operational costs are like a large part of your budget that you have to consider. So things like electricity, the building, the computers, and all the hardware that we have, and we have to constantly update, and just you're not just charging for like the people on your team, but also all the people in the company that are supporting that team, right? Like Terry and Allie, who are like front desk people, and they also like handle like packages and stuff like that. And then like there's like people who only answer emails and only talk to the client, and there's people who like only do some other like fringe stuff, like server guys who only help us with like IT related issues, and you know, like those are costs that like you never really factor in when you start thinking about making a game.
Most of us only work on one thing at a time,
Huh.
like one major project. And then there are the exceptions
Most.
who
Sorry.
work on all sorts of different things all the time.
I'm a shared resource.
That's what his
Tell us
name
what shared
tag
resource
says.
is, Tim.
Shared resource is someone who has a skill that is needed by many projects, but we don't have very many people who do it. So things that typically fall in that category here tend to be effects, animation, and audio. And so since we are also not necessarily needed for the entirety of a project's timeline, it's a little easier for us to jump from project to project and do our work when it is needed and then move on to the next thing. So, like Tim said, most people are on one project at a time, and that's their full focus. For me, it's a little different. I'm on a couple projects at a time, doing pre-production work for one, and then doing full production work for another, and doing post-production work for another, and kind of juggling. So, and that becomes more interesting again based on the different types of projects we have. Sometimes we have one really big project that is what most people are working on for, I don't know, the better part of the year. And then other times we have a lot of smaller projects that are maybe 3-month or 6-month timelines that you juggle differently.
Yes. So with games that you need to make, so if it's not about, working and making a living, in terms of how many games you need to make a year, technically you don't have to make any games.
That's true.
But in terms of, if you want to make one really good game versus a lot of small games, I mean, that's really just personal preference, I think.
And different games can have different scopes. Like, to make a game like Cannibal's really good requires orders of magnitude less staff than to make a game like Destiny good. There's just the systems that you're choosing to implement, the type of game you want to have, those sorts of factors will affect how much time it takes, how many people are required, and how difficult it is to make games.
Also, not to harp on this question for too much longer, but going off of what Dan said, if you want to make, if your goal is to have a beautiful finished game by the end of the year, then yeah, make one beautiful finished game. If your goal is just to get better at making games, then maybe
Make a lot of
making
really
a
bad
lot of
ones.
small or really bad games would be better too, because you're learning stuff with each one that you make. So it totally depends on what your personal goals are.
Yeah, like if you have trouble coming up with game ideas, maybe making a lot of games would be more helpful.
Yeah.
But if you already have like this game idea in mind and you just want to make that game, making a lot of small games probably won't help you make that one game you want to make.
Yeah.
I like to teach people about tools-driven development, which is you're building the tools that are going to help you build the experiences and the games that you want to build. You're, by default, every time that you're learning from the stuff that you're doing, you're engaging in that sort of development process because you're making yourself a bigger and better tool for making games. Not that I'm encouraging people to be tools, but
Lol.
Do we want to answer the source code?
It's mozzarella balls.
I
We have something else.
We'll get to it. I have one lined up.
Okay.
I'm trying to do them in order so people don't wind up leaving before we get to their question.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, we'll
But we've got here.
We'll move quick.
we'll be less long-winded.
Oh, I think we're doing okay. Let us know, folks. If we're dragging on too long for your liking, tell us. Feel free to complain as well as ask questions.
But not too much or we'll block you.
What would you guys say are the best things to have in your resume or portfolio to land a job as a designer?
Games
Things
that
like-
you've made.
Like they're specifically for designers, stuff that you can see is a lot of mods are really good, showing that you like have the ability to place things and to create sort of excitement inside of a game engine, showing that you know how to use these tools, and then also things like design documents. It's not as impressive as putting your ideas into a game, but showing your thought processes for going that stuff is pretty important.
Also making paper games or like board games. Anything, any game that you can make would be beneficial to have in your portfolio as a designer, because if it's a board game, it shows that you can think through a system and design something from beginning to end. Also, along the lines of what Max was just saying about documentation, I don't know if, like, this might not be the most interesting thing to have in a portfolio, but having a link to maybe, like, I don't know, notes that you took along the process of designing a game. Like, let's say you designed a board game, and as you're making it, you're taking notes along the way of, like, this worked, this didn't work, why didn't this work? Let me think about it. Let me, how can I fix that? How can I make this more fun? A lot of times that is a way of basically showing your work. So you designed a game, but now you also have this documentation of like your thought process, and that really helps people see what kind of designer you could be. And that could be in the form of a blog. I know that's often recommended, or something else that you feel inspired to do.
Something else to add is that, and this can apply to like any type of position for games, but definitely finish stuff. Like this was something that I had trouble with when I was a student. I had all these great ideas, and I would start working on things, I'd never finish it. In fact, my side projects are still like that. But you need to have something that you've shown that you can complete. Because it's difficult to show someone like a partial idea. But like actually publishing something to say like, the Apple Store or something like that is definitely very useful. And then, and this is like more specific for, I guess, resumes and stuff. If you tell me that your projects that you worked on were for a class, I don't care. I want to see your passion, and I want to see that you do this kind of outside of your duty. So if, yeah, if you're like, this is my school project, I'm like, whatever. Like show me like the things that you work on the side, right? So, yeah, you gotta keep up with it.
Yeah.
You gotta communicate how awesome you are through your work, and you've got to be awesome, and you've got to sell the person looking at your portfolio on what it is that you are honestly. And a lot of that, the things people said, those are all really good things, but really you're telling the story of your creative output, right? So if you don't have any creative output, that's a problem.
Yeah.
If your creative output looks like it sucks, that's another problem. If I don't understand what your contributions were to the stuff on your portfolio, I can't tell it's your creative output. And if it's just in your head, then it's not actually output.
Yeah.
So your creative output.
Time for
You're not a
another.
messenger.
It's Tim.
Oh, Tim.
Tim making noises.
I knew it.
Classic
I'm
sound.
looking all around on this computer, like, is something going wrong?
No, it's just me.
So we probably shouldn't dwell on this for too long, but
Yeah.
What do you guys use for your code repository? Do you have any tools you prefer to interact with? Your repos?
Oh God.
You prefer
Oh God, oh God, oh God, oh God, oh
tools?
God. Who set you up to ask this question?
We're holding ourselves to 5 minutes on this topic. So we're never speaking of it again.
Let's try and do it in one.
1 minute.
We use Perforce. We use Git if we have to. We use SVN sometimes.
Yes, a smattering all across the board to different degrees
Sometimes you change
of horror.
I like this.
in the middle of a project.
Yeah, people have preferences, and there are holy wars, I believe is the correct term, for which source code repository we are going to use on whatever project. Usually that rests with the tech director, so it's usually whatever they want to do.
Consensus. Team consensus.
Speaking of
Sure.
One of our principles.
They're all
And
bad.
sometimes, usually we use GUI, which is to say graphic user interface tools, but from time to time, sometimes more technical people like to do stuff on the command line. Like,
They're just showing off.
yeah, yeah. When I have
That's absolutely true.
to undestroy our Git repo, and I do that from the command line, it's definitely because I'm showing off, and not because I don't know how to navigate all the menus to find the thing that I want to do.
But with Git, I think sometimes you have to do stuff.
Yeah.
You
how it
can't
goes.
mention Holy Wars without talking about like coding styles, though, right?
Well, let's.
Well,
no one asked that.
There's another
Don't
question for
ask.
that.
No, this is great. This is
Don't
such a great-
ask.
This is such a great segue, because the next question in the list, honestly, is what happens when people on the programming team program in such a way you hate that it is difficult for you to understand? I think this is a great question. So
Okay, so you gotta understand,
programmer,
I'll
so.
preface, I'm not gonna answer this question directly, but I'm just gonna start by saying, there's an amount of work on your project that is creative, interesting, exciting work that changes your thing from a lump of clay into your game. And then there's lump of clay work, right? Source control is firmly in lump of clay work. Like
That's
you
very
can't
fair.
be Michelangelo until you've quarried out the marble and gotten it into your studio and built the scaffolding around your thing. And then you've got to get rid of all those big chunks before you can start doing the really artistic work. That's all lump of clay work. There is a ton of it, and things like coding styles and source control, like their job is to make you have less of that lump of clay work, but perversely they generate their own levels of lump of clay work. And that's always crazy to me, because no, you don't want to do any of that if you can avoid it. You want to do as little of that as you can and maximize your time on creative target, right? So that's my preface of like getting into fights over programming style. Why are you having these arguments, right? You got to think about it. Is this going to slow you down, or are you just going to waste time on it?
That being said, we use C#, so camel case almond style brackets.
We to try and actually answer the question, usually if someone is writing something and you don't understand what it's doing, we have an open office plan here, so usually you can just go up to them and ask them, hey, what is this doing? Why is it like this? And sometimes they'll be like, oh, you know what? It should not be like that. That was kind of silly. Let me fix that. And other times they'll be like, oh, here, let me explain it to you. So, communication is key with that. And also just sort of having your own domain of responsibility. If you've got like a team of 5 or 6 programmers that they're all touching the same 6 files over and over and over again, that's a really great way to cause some issues. But if they all have their own sort of domains where they are free to build up the systems in ways that make sense for them, they are more likely to create something that is consistent internally than if they are constantly bouncing off of other people trying to do the same stuff.
We do a tremendous amount of work in the studio to get ourselves tech that works nicely with 7 people jabbing at the project from different angles with pointy sticks, right? Like, we put so much energy into that because we need to make sure that people have nice separations and don't constantly step on each other's toes.
Is there an amount of like compromise, I guess? Like, if you come into a project and there's all this code base that's like, I really hate the way this is structured, what do? I'm not a programmer, so that's why I'm asking.
I mean, usually that doesn't happen that way per se. Like, generally, people tend to know what they're doing for the most part. But sometimes it's just technical debt. Sometimes systems were implemented in such a way that made sense at the time, but either the requirements have changed or the game mechanics are changing, so you need to go back in and uproot that stuff, and then it just becomes technical debt. And the thing about technical debt is it takes time to pay off that technical debt. If the system is coded in some crazy way that basically works most of the time, maybe it's not worth it to go back in and rewrite it. But maybe if most of the time isn't good enough and it's failing in places where you need it to not fail, then you do have to spend the time and rewrite it yourself to work better with the new requirements.
Yeah, I've had situations emerge where the same piece of code, the same problem is being solved one way, and 2 or 3 days is spent making that solution not break under certain circumstances, and then we stop, rewrite the solution in 3 hours, and it just works perfectly from there on.
Yeah, hindsight is 20/20 when it comes to game implementation. So it is often worth it if you were like, you know what, I did this a stupid way last time. I'm going to spend today, and I'm not going to add any new features, but I'm going to sanitize and solidify what we already have.
Yeah, and a lot of this is like, like Max was saying, the requirements change, what the design is changes, and so it's not uncommon to have to actually redo a lot of work that you've done before because the constraints that you had in there no longer apply or are broken by design. So it's not really seen as something that's bad, like having to rewrite some part of your framework or something. Like, it's something that happens all the time, and you just come to accept it. Like,
works for designs too. Oh, I found a flaw in my design. Let me add a patch rule. I found a flaw in my design. Let me add a special case exception under this circumstance. I found another flaw in my design. Suddenly I've got, 40 pages of exceptions, special cases, and things. Your design has probably got some flaws, and you should probably dig away to find what's actually working and make that the focus rather than all these exceptions and special cases.
And a lot of understanding when you need to make these calls to redo things, to redo old work, a lot of that just comes with experience. Like, a lot of the time, you may not even know that you need to rewrite something until someone points out that, like, this is getting massive into this one code file. You've got, like, 45 functions, each handling special cases that are all similar but doing different things. And eventually, as you become more experienced, you become better at identifying those yourself. And hopefully making fewer of them, but as you were saying, they are unavoidable.
Yeah, and the reason why we don't design, like, say, a framework that can just handle any type of thing in any situation is because that takes too much time to develop, right? And it also becomes confusing later on if you're only using, one slice of your framework versus all of it, because you have all this extra stuff that exists that isn't used by anything. Why is it even there, right? So, yeah, it makes it hard.
All right, I got a question that we probably can't answer, but it'll be fun to dance around it. Any ideas of games you'll make in the future? And I'm going to extend this to, because so much of what we do is client-based and or top secret. If there's any games that you will make in the future, folks in this room, that are not Schell Games games, feel free to talk about those, because we need something we can talk about. So, go.
Sure. I do a lot of game jams on the side. I do Ludum Dare and Global Game Jam. So I don't have any idea of the game I'm gonna make until at that time. So, depends. Anything else? Let's see, on the side, I work on some small mobile arcadey stuff, and also work on polishing up some of my smaller games, but they're still pretty small. So, yeah, usually weird experimental indie platformer puzzle stuff. Very vague.
Yar.
My daughter yesterday demanded to be allowed to play Out Dodge out of nowhere. I gotta play Out Dodge.
It's one of those games. It's free.
It's
App
fun.
Store.
Is she part of your affiliate program?
I'm not sure.
You can talk about a game.
Yes, I mean, I'm currently working on a game recently called Arcoil, because it was called Recoil and the name was, it's
Oh, now
too
it's
many things
Arcoil.
are called that. But nothing's called Arcoil, so it's Arcoil. That is, I mean, it is sort of like Asteroids, only more aggressive. It's a vector style game. More interesting than what it is. That's probably why I'm making it. Maybe it's interesting, I don't know.
The co-op is pretty good.
The co-op is
There's
good.
there's a good sense of progression.
The co-op's pretty good. Oh, thank you. Dan likes it.
I like it.
But yeah, honestly, a large part of the reason that I'm working on it is because it's a game in Unity, and I have not been on enough Unity projects for my own liking inside Schell Games, and I feel like I've been a little left behind, and because we do so much Unity, so I'm forcing myself to learn it. And I wanted to make a game that I would play, and I like old arcade games. And I guess maybe interesting to people that are looking to do a game, I chose to make it a vector art style type game because I can't do art at all. And rather than try to make something that I couldn't do, I very tightly constrained the way it looked by something that I could cobble together in GIMP. So I mean,
I use GIMP.
I know.
I use GIMP too.
Yes,
I think I'm the only artist that uses it.
you are the only artist.
Wait, you're an artist who uses
Microsoft Paint, okay?
You can use Microsoft Paint.
I started with GIMP. I mean, I know how to use Photoshop.
There's nothing wrong with it.
GIMP.
Use whatever tools work for you.
Whatever works.
GIMP is the GNU image manipulation program. It is an open source Photoshop, essentially.
Yeah, well,
Wait,
it's better than Photoshop.
What?
It's
First
better.
letter.
Well, if you're arguing price, yes.
Yeah.
What?
The first letter of the acronym is another acronym?
Yes, that's,
Yes.
we love doing that.
Oh, baby.
That's the best.
Games
very
that
cool.
you'll make in the future. Cool games.
Yeah,
That's the idea of game I'm gonna make.
We have ideas for games that we are going to make in the future,
Something
but we
cool.
are not saying them because that would spoil the surprise.
So I work on some virtual reality side projects. So one of the major problems of virtual reality right now, I think, is that
No fun.
there's no force feedback, right? Like, I can't prevent you from putting your physical hand through a virtual wall, etc. So I like to work on games that kind of explore ways to get around those constraints and make you feel like the virtual world has like a physical presence and things that you're manipulating, like with your hands and stuff, actually you can almost feel it. So I'm working on a number of ideas involved around that. Not much what they are.
A VR escape type adventure game where you play a game developer trapped by increasingly more absurd circumstances and situations and environments. I'm going to call it I Expect You to Ship.
And you're playing it right now.
Whoa!
It's so
It's
real.
like I'm
You
right
can't take
here.
off the headset.
Oh no!
If you die in game dev, you die in real life.
Because it is real life.
Spoilers.
If you're in game dev, do you have a real life?
Whoa!
I'm gonna keep moving through.
Too much philosophy.
It's a hard question, but how important is diversity to the game design process?
Diversity in what sense?
All the senses.
Yes.
All the senses.
Yeah, I guess whatever sense you want to answer the question.
I mean,
Very important.
It depends on
This-
what
Question
kind of
answer.
process, right?
this group, unfortunately, not the most diverse group. Fairly representative of what you would expect when you hear,
Yeah.
people who make video games. But our studio as a whole is significantly more diverse.
It's
That's true.
We're
Just
not
so
actually representative of the studio.
No, we're not.
We're not. We're
We're just-
representative people that
We're
Like,
representative
that
of
one
what
with
people
free
think
come
of
into
the
this
studio.
room and we're
It's
lured
All,
by food.
all of the people, all of the other people are smart and they decided to go home at the
They're
end of the
all
day.
home.
So we're the ones left.
Yeah, people who don't want to like cook dinner,
Yeah.
don't have anything else to do after work.
That's why I stuck around.
The problem is to stay around after work anyways. I do.
I'm here because it's fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do.
I like to have a good time.
Come on, it's a good time.
Yeah.
We have tons of Tootsie Rolls.
But
We have a
I'm
lot.
working my way through.
diversity is very important and should be considered for sure,
Yeah.
because the world is a diverse place. And if you want your game to be successful, you want lots of people to enjoy it, not just one person or one type of person.
And people from different, different countries, different walks of life, different experiences, they bring those different perspectives into the process. And it's not necessarily always going to be explicit of like, because Henry grew up in Brazil? It's like he's got some Brazilian perspective, but just having lived different lives shapes people's minds in different ways, which allows them to see problems differently, which is important.
And to harken back to an earlier question, when we were talking about needing a team, even just having diversity in the skill sets that you have on your team is super important as well. Because if it was just a team of programmers, you can bet the game would not be as good.
Yeah.
When the game would not be good.
Because different people who have studied different things, or even, like you're saying, different walks of life, bring their own perspectives and their own ideas that are different from your own, and so they kind of help inspire and form it to be something that it could not be by itself.
Personality traits are also pretty important. If everybody on your team is a massively optimistic person who has high hopes, dreams, visions, and fairy tales, castles in the sky, you're probably going to be over-scoped, and you're probably going to suffer a lot of agony and pain as a result of it. But if everybody on your team is a salty, jaded veteran who's very battle-scarred, you could wind up with something that has no joy and no soul, and that's very difficult. Like, the extremes and the monocultures, those are just bad. They're just universally bad. I've never heard of a monoculture in game dev that actually is productive. Even like I'm not gonna name drop, but super high profile studios whose names you've heard of, right, suffer from this internally and like look at each other and say, we really suffer from this monoculture thing. We're gonna lose out in the future. And everybody looks at them and is like, yeah, you're absolutely right. What should we change? Absolutely nothing. Yeah, we're great.
But we identified the problem.
But we've identified the problem, right? But it's terrifying because that's exactly, you know, like you can get to be so focused and so driven, and so we are this culture and we hire to this culture and we hire to fit this culture and our culture is this, that like how can you even possibly change that? Like it's homeostatic. It just continually reinforces its own behavior.
Big words.
Anyway, my grade level is terrifying on this conversation.
So, short answer, very.
Very important. Almost every sense of the word diversity, it's
Yeah.
important. All right,
It's called diversity.
If everybody likes the same type of sandwich, you never get the right mix in the sampler platter.
you don't-
gotta have the
you don't get
diversity
this-
of
Wouldn't
sandwiches.
wouldn't it be easier to order the sandwiches though?
No.
It's just like everyone's getting roast beef.
No.
All right, so I threw out a new question. From what I heard, you guys mainly use Unity 3D there. That is largely true, but not exclusively. Do you script in C#? How involved are designers with the scripting? I think that the last part is an interesting question. So because
Is there any designers?
the answer is yes. It is mostly C#.
Mr. Technical Designer.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, nobody here codes in JavaScript.
Right.
In Unity.
Yeah.
Marlena does on the side though.
Not in Unity, though.
No, not on Unity. But
Right, but
We got some
like,
HTML5
there's
stuff.
certain things you have to use JavaScript for if you want to do stuff, but not Unity.
No, you don't.
Rebecca used to do that.
Disagree. Like we've shipped HTML5 games and we stopped using JavaScript. We use Haxi, which is transpiled to JavaScript.
Which, but sometimes you have exceptions in the hacks. That's just raw JavaScript because that's how it works.
Okay,
So
we
you
are
should be able to-
totally going off topic with the question.
We use Unity, we script in C#. Some of the designers write codes, some of them write no code. And then we also have things in between.
So yeah, there's a big continuum based on technical acumen, and there's things that really look like programming. If you understood what programming is and isn't, and you look at what the designer does, what they're doing is programming. They might not be using curly braces and semicolons, but they are really like they are expressing themselves using algorithmic procedural languages, right?
Visual
Well,
programming.
scripting.
And it's either visual or sometimes it's simply just a matter of these rules are just very complicated and they intersect and they have all these operations that need to be figured out, and it's not loose, it's not creative, like they have to get it right. They have to get these things to line up and map to each other. And it's very technical. So even though it's not necessarily in C#. So all of that is like technical design. How do I express myself as a designer in a way that the computer understands?
Yeah, so as an engineer, it's really important to give the other disciplines abilities to affect the look and feel of the game, right? Because, it's when you're an engineer, all the other disciplines, almost rely on you to put their input into the game. So an artist's like, I made this great thing, put it in the game. And designer's like, I have this great idea, put it in the game. And so what you want to be able to do is to create tools that allow people in other disciplines to, without writing code, create content, right? So we have this internal thing. Are we going to talk about Vignette Editor? I guess so, right? We have this thing called
Yes.
Vignette Editor that we made.
Ryan
and
said it
it's-
was fine, so.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So yeah.
It's like a node graph, right? I don't know. I've actually never used it.
Really?
So
I use it.
read
Visual
my-
scripting, yeah, it's
Yeah.
node-based scripting. That's basically what it is.
So you have a node, it might perform an action, it might do some checking, it might branch on things, it might do things in sequence, and then they're connected in such a way that you can say, okay, check this thing, if it's true, go to this node, if it's not true, go to this node. And that's a lot of similar, like what Tim was saying, that is what programming is, essentially. It's just in programming, we type out the word if, and then we type the variable name. Whereas when they're using this visual scripting language, we try to build them the tools where even though they can't type, whatever they want, they don't have the full Turing complete thing that you have with a programming language. They have enough of the tools that they can create the systems that they want and make the systems behave the way that they want without having to come back to the programmer every time they want to make a change.
Yes. And sometimes, if the designer does have experience with programming, they could do some small tweaks in code, perhaps.
And then we have a bunch of designers who have like computer science degrees. Like Marlena has a CS degree, Mel has a CS degree, and others, I assume.
Yeah. Mel was a programmer when I was hired.
And now she's a designer.
Yeah. Sabrina as well.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yes.
Sean as well.
Yeah, that's right, Sean.
Sean Patton?
Yeah.
Huh.
Back when we were
You
so
can whip
small,
up
we didn't
some.
have designers, they were all programmers.
The only representative of the designer side of the studio who's here, Tim, you write code all the time.
Yeah, and I have
Like the same
I
one.
have a CS degree. But like I always try to be I write too much code. I still write too much code. Look, the moral of the story is it's all about expressing your vision inside of the engine, right? However you get to that route, that needs to be your end goal, right? Either somebody is supporting you, or you're figuring it out yourself, or you're using third-party packages, and you're developing a model of how your tool set and your engine works. And as you become more and more proficient, you can use that model to guide where you go, whether it's your game idea or what you're going to work on next, or why is this bug doing this thing that is unexpected. And that's the thing you want to try to build as a designer, even if you're not going to be a programmer. Like, you have to have that understanding.
So the next question, just quickly, mostly because someone asked it, and I'm personally curious. Are any of you guys going to Replay Effects? I personally am thinking about going, but not in any official Schell Games capacity.
When is it?
I don't know.
I don't know.
I'm
Give
not.
a
I
good
think it's
I
in
have not
August.
either.
I think it's in August.
That seems right.
replay
Yeah, no, tell me.
effects.
Pretty cool. Are you?
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
gaming festival thing.
In Pittsburgh?
It's in
Yeah,
Pittsburgh.
yeah, it's in
Sound like-
Pittsburgh.
Wow.
I'm sure we're the largest
Tornado.
mall.
Oh, July.
Yeah, I'm sure
Oh,
Tim
yeah.
will be there.
July 27th through 30th.
July
Missing
27th.
Tim.
Oh, I'm going to be out. I'm going to be out late.
He will not be, neither will I.
Neither will I.
I might be there.
Yeah,
Say
I
hi.
might also be there.
But will you be with Jesse?
I'm sure. Hopefully, I'll see him and say hi. I'm not going to be there in any official capacity, but I was thinking about going because it seemed like a cool event.
Yeah, no one in this room worked on Toontown, right?
No, I mean, I worked on a massively beloved MMO that got shut down prematurely, but that was City of Heroes, not Toontown.
So sure
we
what's
have
the
a
start
City
date
of Heroes
universe?
question.
Don't
That
get me
never
started.
shipped.
Don't get him started.
Don't get me started.
Yeah, so I guess that's
Next question.
That's the whole answer. Maybe-
Toonfest sounds cool though.
All right, this is a
Do
giant short
they
question.
have one of the guys with one of the old Chuck E. Cheese sets come out? I was at a classic gaming festival once in California where this guy just brought in, like, here's the entire Pizza Time theater band. And it was
Oh,
just-
that's awesome!
Wow.
I'm definitely going.
How do you have that? How do you?
I'm going, and I expect that to be there.
It's just stuff. I mean, he just had the stuff.
Where would you even have that?
An old Chuck E. Cheese.
Yeah.
Keep it in an attic and bring it out.
I would
A lot
keep
of
it in
scared
the
children.
first floor.
All right, so giant but short question: what is the hardest part of making a game?
Shipping.
Ooh, what is the hardest
That's
part
a
of
good
making a game? Keeping it within scope, shipping. Yeah.
I'll say finishing the game, which includes shipping. Yeah.
I would say for an indie developer, it's getting anyone to care that you made the game.
That is true.
That is also incredibly
That's
true.
true.
That is really
Yeah,
true.
being
Yeah.
paid is incredibly important and not easy.
The hardest part of waking up is folders. Yeah.
Wow, you're lost.
I mean, for shipping, what I mean by shipping, if you are like not inside of the game industry and don't understand what we mean by that, like
Actual
it's-
boats.
Yeah, yes, we need to construct Viking rafts and then we set Tim alight on the Monongahela River.
Even though he asked us not to do that.
No, but when you're making a game, like you get to the part where it's funny, like this is a fun thing, this is fun, this interaction right here. But then there's so much else. Like Tim was saying, there's the clay that surrounds your sculpture of David or whatever. So it's things like, you know, maybe it works correctly 90% of the time, but 90% of the time is not good enough. You need to figure out the bugs, the little slips of the mind, the little corner cases where things break down, and you need to fix all of those, or as much of them as you possibly can. You need to make sure that the game works not just for you, the person who built the game, but also for other people who haven't built the game. People can come in and be able to play the game and also enjoy the same things that you are seeing. And a lot of that has to do with, you know, polishing art and polishing audio and making sure things read correctly.
So that's time and skill hard. Emotionally hard is showing it to other people and listening to them.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
That
for
is
sure.
the emotionally challenging most part. Like we literally have to lie to testers to claim like, oh, I didn't actually work on this thing. I'm just showing it off to you.
Yeah,
and
I've
collecting
said that so
feedback."
many times to playtesters.
Because if you don't like put on the mask of professional distance, you just like, no, do it this way. Why aren't you appreciating this thing? That's not,
Why won't you love me? Smack!
You know, I don't think this is very good. What do you know? Like it's very easy to go into that mode
Yeah.
where like I put my heart and my soul and my creative passion, this thing, it is like my grand golden child. And the person looks at it for 3 seconds and dumps it in the trash. And you're like, how dare you do that to my child, right? And like you have to get all past that. Right, and it's very much like, you know, you're the person getting up doing stand-up in front of the live mic, or the person who's busking or doing improvisational comedy theater, right? That's super challenging, and it happens in all these creative fields. And like, just because you're a programmer on a game doesn't isolate you from that need to get over that creative bearing of the soul moment where you have to accept that your output might not be super perfect and that it might not work for everybody that you show it to.
It's true.
We
I will say, well,
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say that is one of the benefits of being a musician specifically, before working in games, is that you have to do that all the time, and especially in school. You have to put output in front of people, and then they tell you what's wrong with it.
No, critiques.
And yeah, and in art school too. But at least music feels personal, feels connected to your body. Anyways, so I feel like, not to say anything bad to the programmers in the room, but I feel like programmers haven't experienced that necessarily. Sometimes they have. If your computer science program is tough, and in art school too. But at least music feels personal, feels connected to your body. Anyway. It was
I
me.
saw what happened. I tried to stop it.
Oh,
Sorry.
So how much
Was
did
that
it
audio?
lose?
We probably
Video?
lost the microphone for a second.
Oh, you didn't hear any of my brilliant stuff.
Here, I will summarize what Tim said. It helps if you are Tim because then you are already great at it.
No, that's not true. It's actually still really hard when you put music in front of people on your team and then they don't like it. You're like, yeah!
Artists and musicians have to go through this withering barrage of critique to really even get noticed as people who are good at that. Like sometimes designers haven't even really ever experienced a situation where somebody doesn't, like
Disagrees with them.
have other people played your games? Do they like your games? Do people not like your games? What did you do about the people who did not like your games? Like,
Cut 'em out of your life.
that's all too common a reaction,
Yeah.
right? Oh, it's not for them. It's like, whoa.
Were you trying to make it
whoa.
for them?
Because, like, I mean, maybe that's true, but maybe you're just an ass, and we shouldn't be looking at you as a game developer for the studio. Anyway.
No, I was just gonna say, just because it's a funny story, during a play test for Enemy Mind, we had a player say, I usually play more real games than this.
What does that mean?
That it's not a real game.
I prefer games that are more real than this.
If it doesn't have a Metacritic, I don't even want to touch it.
Yeah, yeah. I think it does. I think it might finally work. Yeah.
It even happens in engineering sometimes,
Stings.
though. Like, I mean, there's two different cases, right? Like, there's the one where so there's this one time I was making this game for a Google project, and it was a very accurate simulation of physical events, and the feedback was, it's too hard. And I'm like, get good, son. But apparently you can't say that. And then there's other times when, where I make this really perfect framework, and it just does this thing, and it's super elegant, and then someone's like, I want to add a feature. The thing that it does, I want to do the opposite of that. I'm like, no, and then I have to take my perfect thing and add this stupid add-on to it. And it's,
Sorry about that.
it's no longer
That was me. You were like, it doesn't really do
wasn't-
that.
It's not always.
I mean,
But I need it to do that.
I've definitely had the same experience, that second one, where I had written a system recently for the thing that I'm working on right now, where I'd just come onto the team and they had told me what the project is about. I'm like, okay, I've got a great idea of how to implement this thing. And I implemented the system, and then I worked on some tooling so that there was a nice array of checkboxes, and I spent a lot of time getting all of that stuff to look really good. And then we get it into the game, people are starting to play with it, and it straight up didn't work. Like, the systems were not allowing people to accomplish the correct actions. So we just had to tear it all down, and we had to do something which the tooling doesn't look as nice on it. It's not as fun of a thing, but it gives the designers the power that they wanted to make the game good, and the game is significantly better now. So, it's sad, but that's life.
That's life.
You just get better at doing it over and over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You start to get desensitized to people telling you that your work sucks.
Just laugh at
Just
it.
keep going.
Oh, you don't just ignore it.
Yeah, you take it in
have to
stride.
You have to figure out how to receive that critique. And you also have to give
It's
critique.
valid,
Compartmentalization.
yeah. Sometimes it's not always valid.
Is it
Sometimes
tough
it
to
is.
just assume that your work is bad all the time?
No.
No.
Oh.
Because then you'll never
whoops.
get it out.
I
No,
guess I'll
if-
stop doing that.
If I had a designer
Maybe you should
on
start
my
doing
team,
some work.
it was always like, as soon as
No,
there
you
was
just
any
look bad. Everyone
criticism,
says
they
they
just
just
stopped.
Yeah. It'd be bad. You wouldn't get the game done. So.
Every code file that I've ever written is perfect until I hear otherwise. And then it gets burned.
Wow. That's good though. That's a good way to think.
Oh,
Alright.
unless you're taking the hits kind of far.
Oh, we're getting a lot of nice short questions.
Yeah, here's another short one. Where would you start in terms of programming? So I assume this is someone who has done no programming at all, is looking for a way in, so.
I started programming on a TI-83 calculator.
Really? That's your
Don't
first
start
ever?
there.
Alright, yeah, don't start.
Don't start.
Don't get mad.
No, the basic, the programming language BASIC, it doesn't have crazy brackets. It's mostly words that people already understand. You see if, you see then, you see else, and you can make stuff happen with that. So that's not the worst place in the world to start. And I know a bunch of other programmers have started in BASIC. Maybe not on calculators, maybe they were actually using computers back in the day. But there are certain languages which are easier to pick up than diving straight into C++, say, which I do not recommend.
Well, I will say that I also started in BASIC on a Soviet TV computer, but I have heard people say that BASIC is the worst place to start. So
Interesting.
don't necessarily do
I mean-
that.
Literally half of the programmers in this room.
I mean, the
started
general
with
question
BASIC.
I've heard, general answer I've heard to this question is you can start anywhere as long as you're making games. But, of course, there's,
That's not even an answer.
it's not really an answer, yeah.
I started with the StarCraft Brood War map editor.
There you go,
Because
mods.
it had logical conditions,
That was the first thing I
If,
did
then,
too, actually.
switch, all that kind of stuff.
I'll tell you.
How much?
Was it?
Sorry, didn't mean to stomp on you.
Yeah, go ahead.
if you're coming from design and you want to break into programming, my first recommendation is build a board game, write the rules for it, give it to people you don't know, stand in a corner, and have them follow the rules and figure out how to play your game. And once you've got that nailed, then think about jumping into programming.
Then you're ready to teach computer to do it.
Right? Because
Right.
now you got to teach the computer how to do that.
And they're really dumb.
But like most designers, it's better to start from the basis of, I know how to express myself cleanly and precisely, now let me do it on a computer. Rather than, because it's very easy to just muddy the waters by jumping right into the code. Now, if the code is essential to making you interested in doing it, and the idea of writing down rules is utter boredom, there are lots of online website interactive sandboxy type learn how to code this language thing, and I would recommend trying those out.
True.
I feel like I should maybe follow up my snide but hilarious comment with some more useful advice. First of all, if you look at the Unity tutorials, for some reason they actually teach you the basics of programming as they teach everything else about Unity.
Yeah.
So which is tedious if you already know programming. So
Right.
maybe don't learn programming first, go straight in there. But also, if you start with something like Quick Basic, then you learned about go-tos, and now you have to unlearn that, never use go-tos again. So you want to start with a
Go-tos.
language
I
that
don't know
teaches you
about
structured
go-tos.
programming, maybe something basic about object-oriented programming.
So you're
and-
thinking Lisp and Java?
Or you can just go to assembly and, stick with the go-tos.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, I have done a lot of assembly, and it is useful to learn to know what the computer is really doing, but then you don't actually want to write any assembly in practice. But Lisp might be a good place to start if you have some people.
You love parentheses.
Like, this is not a topic that is by any means settled. People have
Yeah.
different opinions. Some people think C. If you do learn C, at least you will understand how computers, like memory layouts and architecture, which is very important with games, knowing about things like cache locality. If you're doing something like Lisp, that is a way to structure your thoughts in such a way that evaluation is consistent and clean. If you're doing it correctly, I'm sure there are ways to write garbage Lisp programs too. And then if you want to jump into C++, like there are books which are like teach yourself C++ in 30 days. You're probably not going to get as much out of that as you would from working with someone to develop those skills. But there are lots of resources to get into a bunch of different games.
What motivates you to learn? Like, by now you should have learned what motivates you to learn, and there's probably something that scratches that itch. Whether it's, I get to see stuff move on the screen, start with game engine tutorials.
Yep.
I really want proficiency with the language, I'll start from the perspective of learning the language. I really want to learn from somebody else, be buds with a friend and do that.
Yeah, I think that, like, as, making games, like, we have the opportunity to have instantaneous feedback on the code we write. If you're writing code for, like, a bank or something, then you'll never really see it in action because it's so invisible what's happening. But for a game, you write a line of code and then you press play and it happens, and there's a lot of enjoyment to that, and there's a lot of, like, I don't know, I feel like you really get a lot out of that. So, games is a good place to start for coding in general.
Yeah, I think that finding your motivation, like Tim was saying, like why you want to learn how to program is more important than like how you want to learn to program. If you want to learn how to program to make games, there are books that are specifically like learn C++ to make games, or do the Unity tutorials, and then you can be like, I think the Unity tutorials would actually be a good place to start, because as soon as you can learn, what are the things that I can do inside of this engine, you can start to understand how do I get the game inside of my head out into the world. And the programming is not the end goal, the programming is the path that allows you to do that.
It's good to have a foundational knowledge. But
That is true. Like, not knowing about cache locality makes your stuff really slow, and it's not great. But
So,
separately.
I didn't mean to cut you off. So we scheduled this till 7. We don't actually have to stop right at 7. I don't know what you guys have planned for the night. If you want, like, yes. If you're happy sitting here eating Tootsie Rolls and talking about games,
no, I
you
ate some
can
Tootsie
keep
Rolls.
doing it. But yeah, I mean, if anyone needs to get up and leave, that is totally fine too. I don't want to force everyone to stay here. So.
What is my life like
We have a
today?
few more questions.
We have a bunch of we do have a bunch of questions.
Bunch of
Maybe we
questions.
can- maybe we can limit them, make them go faster.
going.
Pick ones,
rounds.
pick ones that we could do quickly.
All right, I will try. I will try.
Didn't we just try that?
We didn't actually try that.
No.
We didn't try.
We
No,
didn't.
I've been going in order so that people aren't.
Oh, going in order is probably safe.
All right,
But we'll
let's
be,
keep doing it.
we'll restrict ourselves if it's a
Yeah.
truly open-ended, there is.
If we
no
go,
answer.
if we go fast enough to catch up, then we immediately pull the plug and run out.
Yes.
All right, that's true. So
Regular.
we're gonna speed round.
That's an incentive mechanic
Lightning
right
round.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we should start.
Yeah.
All right, so here
That's
we
an
go.
incentive from everybody.
How do you decide when and who to do client projects and when to do original IPs and just post by yourself, pitching and selling ideas, prototypes inside the company?
We have several venues for pitching ideas inside the company. The company is always looking for the best, awesomest thing that we could possibly do. How much money we spend on it is very much a function of how big, how hot, how many, burn rate and all those things, and that's really just math and numbers and business, and that's not the interesting stuff. So pretty much everybody is focused on ideas rather than worrying immediately about the allocations associated with it.
But,
Because- Yep.
but at the same time, we take on client work, so if we say that we are going to sign this contract to deliver this project in 6 months or so, that means that we need to know upfront what are the resources we are going to allocate, whether that is programmers, designers, producers, artists, how much audio time do we have. We need to keep all of these things in mind so that we can take on the correct number of projects so that we don't have people sitting idle for months at a time, or we don't have too many projects so that their quality suffers. So it's a delicate balancing act, and that's why we have producers and our VPs to keep that sort of stuff in check.
Yeah, we have to track some VPs in general in these sessions at some point.
We need to get some VPs, we need to get some artists, we need to get some
Some
diversity.
upper management.
They're way too important.
I'm artist.
That's
For-
true.
For IPs,
But
Producers.
I'm,
you know, no matter who you are, it's very, very difficult to make money on IPs.
Yes.
If you're an indie dev.
Go onto
Um,
Steam, look at the games that have released today, and ask yourself how many of those are going to be profitable.
Oh, that's harsh.
That's harsh.
Or don't ruin your whole day.
I'm just saying, you gotta be realistic sometimes.
No, it's realistic.
You're not wrong.
So yeah, that means
Speaking
that,
that to Mike's heart.
like, we
He
can
makes something
take
because
on
he
as
loves them,
as
so.
much IT
Sure,
work
I
as we want
expected
to.
to fail financially.
We always have more ideas than we have the ability to actually produce.
That's good, we have a bank of ideas.
But yeah, and so to, you know, keep the lights on, we do a lot of client work. But we also love our clients, you know.
One of our principles relates to this.
Yeah, I mean, the goal.
We don't build to make money, we make money to be able to build.
Right, yeah, that's right. And we do try really hard to work with clients that we want to work with, and I think we do a pretty decent job of doing that. I think it is rare that we have a project that is a client project where we are just hating it. I think we generally are pretty good at avoiding those. Every once in a while, something goes off the rails. That's unavoidable in all things in life, but yeah, we try not to do that. We're not into
We try not to hate ourselves.
We try not to go off the rails and have miserable
We
lives.
like being able to wake up and look ourselves in the mirror.
Yeah.
Next question.
All right, next question.
That is exclusive of our vampire American constituents.
Right.
How many bugs do you encounter on a daily basis while programming?
Our own
All
bugs or other
day.
people's bugs?
Oh my goodness.
Oh, that's a very important distinction.
So, today I wrote a brand new system that turned out to be less than 20 lines, and I was like, this is going to work perfectly. But it was depending on an old system that I had written 2 months ago, which worked for the case that it was built for, But when I introduced the new thing, there were a lot of bugs. So I spent half an hour writing the new system, and then 2 hours debugging the old system so that there were actually not bugs there. So I would say on a daily basis, I am encountering multiple bugs. Most of the time they're in things that I write because I'm writing most of my own code, but sometimes like we're using third-party libraries, and sometimes things don't work the way they were told to work. And then sometimes you have to work around it, sometimes you have to hack it, sometimes you go to whoever the third party is and you're like, you gotta fix this, otherwise it won't work good.
18.
Explicitly.
Is that every day or is that an average?
That is the
That is
only
a rolling average.
Rolling average, okay.
I'm only
I was
allowed
gonna
to
say,
have
like,
18.
a few per day, and then like on the first couple of days of QA, all of a sudden you get like 30 or 40 bugs, and QA is like, haha, we broke your game.
Yeah, those are worse.
So I think of it like a
In the
kitchen.
nicest way.
I think of it like working in a kitchen, right? You're building. Do you clean up as you go? Or do you just wait and leave all the pots and pans to the end? That's really the determining.
Or do you just throw everything in the sink and like
QA
How many pots and pans do you
or
have?
Tremendous QA.
I have
Funny,
one.
Do you have
I'm a
endless
pots
pots and
and pans at
pans?
the end kind of guy
I have
in
one
all
pot.
things.
I run my teams on the clean as you go principle.
I remember for one of my technical director likes to tell the story of one of the old projects that Schell Games was working on for over a year, where every Friday they would take off to only do maintenance tests, to fix bugs that they had seen but didn't have the time to fix at the time,
Sure.
and just to try and
nice.
keep things clean as they were going on.
I wish my project would be that.
That was Bug Day on Lexico.
That was Bug Day on Mexico.
Yeah.
That was one of the reasons why. That was a project that we worked on for 3 years, and the first half of that project was a nightmare. And then we sat and looked at ourselves in the mirror and said, what are we really doing here? And the last segment of that project was really good because of things like Bug Day. Because we said, we needed this.
Bug Day was cool,
Killed
except
bugs.
for us on the audio. Team Audio Fridays were not Bug Day. Fridays where we worked on other project days.
So Friday was scramble around and put all of the other.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would
So
say, like,
other people handle our bugs day.
You know, if
Sorry.
I'm running into one of my own bugs, I don't feel bad about it.
Yeah.
And often I'll fix it without other people noticing that it was ever a bug or whatever. But like, whenever the bug is like, I'm trying to do something and someone else causes the bug, then it becomes a lot more complicated because you need to communicate with them like, well, you know, why does this bug exist? Like, let's say it's a content bug, like, and it's on an artist or a designer or something like that. Like, you need to like diagnose the problem, then figure out if this problem is something that's systemic and needs like a larger change, or if it's just in this one instance and stuff like that. And then everything becomes a lot more complicated. But when it's just you, then you can like hit a bug and you'll be like, I don't think anyone notices. I'll just quickly fix it, and then no one will be the wiser. That's how I operate. Yeah.
And sometimes your designer comes up to you and he's like, why isn't the thing where I want it to be? And then I look at the thing and I'm like, your numbers are all wrong. He's like, I didn't even know those numbers were there. Whose fault is that?
Oh, man. All right, another question. How familiar are you with user experience design for games? Do you have any UX specialists or know of any UX specialists in the industry?
I saw a really cool talk at GDC. I don't remember what year it was.
Go on.
But it was like this lady who was like this PhD, and she was talking about like buckets and how like people are able to process one thing per bucket at a time, and the buckets are like language processing, some kind of like shape recognition, and some kind of color thing, right? So when you're like designing the UI, they can read something, and at the same time they can see a flashing button, and at the same time they can register the silhouette of their main character amongst like a background, right? And if you try to introduce two things in the same bucket at once, they can't do that.
We do have UX specialists in the studio. It's not just based on some.
They're not in this
We
group.
put all of our
They're
UX
here
specialists
now.
in a bucket.
Yeah. They went home, but
Yeah.
Yes.
And most designers have had a passing familiarity with the theory. Most of our user experience and user interface artists have a passing familiarity with all of that stuff, but they also, there are some people who are really into it. There are some people who are really very much focused on that. And when it comes to how, like, every engineer here, every artist, every designer is way more invested in user experience as a whole than you would find in almost any other industry.
Yeah, if you're writing JavaScript functions for Amazon to make the pages load faster, you care about the user experience, but only in the sense of like how quick it gets to your user. Where it's here, we care about, can our people figure out the mechanics? Can they understand their health or their resources? Are they able to effectively articulate their will inside of the game system? So a lot of that stuff is super important. So when we're going through playtests, while we do have people who are more focused on UX, in playtesting, anyone can call out and say, you know, this doesn't feel right. I don't understand what's going on here. We need to fix this.
Yeah, and everyone touches on user experience. Every discipline touches on it in their own right.
Yeah, I think
That's
with what I do in art, I think a lot of it ends up being more polishy player feedback.
Mm-hmm.
So that could be something like, oh, there's a book, and you know, right now, you know, you can turn pages, and a lot of work I was doing was just getting the pages flipping and things turning on and off to feel right. And it's a pretty minor thing in the game itself, but when it's wrong, you notice it immediately. So, like small things like that.
And like a designer trying to make an economy feel right in the game.
Yeah.
That's basically user experience, because if you end up with too much money, that's never the issue, but whatever. If you end up, basically, they're doing their own form of user experience because it is ultimately a user's experience.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's called feedback,
Yeah.
sometimes it's called indirect control, sometimes
Yeah.
it's called communication.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is also, you know, playtesting, making sure, you know, players are actually using the game playing the game as expected.
Why won't you do what I want you to do?
That was unexpected. I thought it don't make the mic. That was a
Let's have a
ringtone.
play test, right?
we throttle the tester.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Throttling.
I
It's an
remember
important
I-
Throttling, yeah, throttling.
In Unexpected Die, one of the problems we had a lot was like people, people would be like, I don't have this thing and no one's telling me. And while they're saying that, there's a voice that's like, it's right here. Do this exact instruction. And the person's like, I don't get it. And it's like, they just don't listen.
It's true. It's a constant issue.
Yeah, you have to be aware that people don't listen, and you have to, like, that's your constraint as a designer, right? Like, I have to make a game that gives you instructions even though people don't listen to instructions.
Yeah, design.
And it's still your
Design it
job
so they
to
do
it,
listen.
right?
People don't read, people don't listen, people
Right.
don't pay attention, and people don't care.
Right.
Now go make.
And we still want them to enjoy the game, so. Like,
This sounds like a society.
it's a hard job.
It is hard.
But you have to trick them into all
To
of
doing
those
it,
things.
yeah.
Alright, do any of you have a favorite game made from Schell Games?
Ooh.
Intercube.
There's a question.
Or Inner Cow, actually. Inner Cow is my favorite.
I was never published.
That is a travesty.
They don't have to, it doesn't have to be published games.
Does that mean I can say like Null Point stuff? Null Point's a popular one.
You can
Yeah.
absolutely say Null Point.
Yeah.
I've never played Null Point.
And still it's your
Aw,
favorite game.
wow.
I really like the
It's
name.
great.
Harsh.
It's pretty
People
cool.
say it's really good.
It was pretty cool.
You can still get those.
I like Water Bears VR, and no,
I mean,
one's
I haven't
published,
checked
but
out.
I love Water Bears VR.
I like Water Bears VR too.
Yeah.
Water Bears is fun.
You should all go
Yeah.
and download Water Bears VR. I think it's free.
I did the characters for Water Bears Beer. So.
Did
I
we-
Expect You
did-
to Die is
Is it
fun.
free?
Did we actually
know.
put beach party mode into the actual ship?
No.
I don't think so.
But it can still be
No,
your
it's me.
favorite.
You-
But like
you
you're
guys
on a
need
beach,
to-
so the party is within you.
Yeah, just post to the Steam page saying how much you'll pay for each party.
Yeah, that's a good idea. If you're a fan of water bears and you want to play with water bears more, just flood the Steam discussion forums with asking for a game where you can just sit on the beach and play with water bears. 'Cause
Yeah.
you might get it.
Just buy gift versions of it and send them all to We Want Steam Water Bears.
You got hundreds of giant water bears floating around you. It's great.
It is really good. It is really
Final Planners, rip.
Rip. I actually also really enjoyed Lexica. I miss it. I'll say it. It was nice. It was an enjoyable game.
I think I have that one checked out too.
I'm
It was
just laughing at super.
Yeah. It's true.
Games that are
The directions.
tears of joy that someone read the directions.
Grab the mask.
Understandable.
Yes.
Next.
You're probably the only one.
Yeah, that's why it was tears of joy. Alright, moving right through them. What usually comes first when you design games? Story, setting, or gameplay?
Budget.
Schell Games,
Oh,
yeah.
shit, sorry.
Games can come from anywhere. Some games start with, oh, this is the mechanic that I want to build the game around. Now we need to think of the theming around this. Sometimes it's, oh, this theming is really good. What is the game that fits in this world? What is the game that goes with the story? What are the mechanics that can support this narrative?
Sometimes other goals. Like, I want to teach someone how to read.
Right.
Well, this is Schell Games, so most of the time it's a pun.
It's true. a fair number of puns.
How can we
Team
support
names
the
are puns.
silliest pun possible?
I think personally for me, I usually start off with the mechanics, but usually the mechanics are there to tell some kind of theme or story, and then I work from there usually.
How did I expect
maybe a
you to
drawing.
start?
Started as
Constraints.
A premise?
Constraints, actually.
Yeah,
Constraints.
constraints.
Matt D is credited
So,
as the originator of it.
It was like some of the origins of I Expect You to Die was make a
Can't-
VR game where you can't move.
Can't move.
Yeah, no player motion. Right?
Yeah.
So
the
what do you
question
do?
was, right, like how do
That's
you feel
true.
powerful? Because like the VR experience, when you first try it, it feels really powerful, but this is back for the DK1, right?
Yeah.
Where all of you had it was only 3 DOF, so all you could do was look around and you had a mouse.
So for people who don't know what that means, DK1 is the Oculus Dev Kit 1. 3 DOF means 3 degrees of freedom, which means that you can only do rotations.
Oh yeah. So you
when
can't
you move your
even,
head
like,
forward, the world moves forward with your head. That's what
And you get really sick.
Yeah.
yeah, it doesn't feel good.
So we had to think of like, well, all right, so you had this like device that could potentially produce a very powerful moving experience. And so the question was, how do you make yourself feel powerful with all the constraints that are there, right? So what kind of like superhero or whatever had these constraints, but they're still awesome? And Matty D, I guess, came up with, James Bond, because he's always getting put in some kind of crazy death trap.
Can't move.
Like tied to a table with a laser or something, and yet he's still like an awesome guy and does good stuff.
So I'd say in some respects, the phrase I would use is vision. Right? The thing that comes first is the vision, and the vision could be any of those things.
Yeah.
Didn't you say Enemy of Mine came to you in a dream?
Vision.
It did actually. Yeah, it did. Yes, it's true. Yeah, I had a dream that I mean, it's a dream, so it's fuzzy, but the idea, because it's now a 4-year-old dream. But it was some deal where like I was driving to work and I could somehow, instead of driving, could just like send my consciousness into the car in front of me, and then was able to get to work more quickly by just taking over people's bodies.
And that's why Enemy Mine is a driving simulator.
And so Enemy Mine.
The people behind the new Mario game had the same exact dream.
I
Yeah,
know,
they
it's
did.
crazy. It's crazy.
Except for the hat.
Enemy hat.
It's a shared vision.
Yeah.
You inspired them.
Carl Jung
I'm
has a
fairly sure
field
that
day.
they played Enemy Mine and stole that idea. Because I don't know how else that could
We're
happen.
like roughly 95% certain. Our lawyers are going to be talking to them very shortly.
Our one lawyer. Yeah.
Wait, aren't we getting an intern?
I don't. If we do, we're putting them on that task.
Suing Nintendo?
No, watching the stream and trying to get us out of the trouble we just got ourselves in. Listen to what this guy said. Welcome to Schell Games.
What else you got?
All
Next
right, Let's
question.
keep going. Any tips for creating my own mini games? Where should I start? Do I need any other tools other than the compiler itself?
Almost certainly.
Sounds like you should just start.
Yeah. Find an engine. You don't want to build your own engine.
Probably.
You almost certainly don't want to build your own engine. You can be modding. Modding is a place where a lot of good games come from. Like PlayerUnknown's Battleground sold 4 million copies and it started as an Arma mod. I know other people have gone into the industry through modding. If you're trying to just start making simple games, Unity is pretty easy to get online. I say that as someone who has had like a programming background. But I didn't have any sort of art background. I didn't have any game type stuff background before I started working in Unity. So you can go in and you can, get spheres and cubes moving around and bumping into
Yes,
each other.
spheres
And
and cubes.
there you go. There's a minigame for you.
You are Unity's target audience.
Yes.
Yeah, I think
Like that's the key
absolutely right.
takeaway there. There's also things like Game Salad and
Game
stuff
Maker.
like
Game
that.
Maker.
Game Maker's pretty
But
big
basically,
now.
I want to get into the games industry. How do I do that? Or I want to build my own games. That is actually big effing business these days. There are lots of people out there catering to you, right? You can include us a little bit in that, but like there are other places as well, and like they have products that you're going to enjoy, and most of those products are free to get started with, just like Unity.
Yeah, Unity is free to get started with. Unreal is free to get started with, although I would say there's probably more overhead if you want to get into the technical aspects. But for doing some art stuff, I've seen artists, not even technical artists, do some crazy things in Unreal just using their visual scripting and stuff like that.
Yeah, for one of the Jamwick projects, Brad, who's an artist, with pretty much no technical background, he made an FPS, and it made me really upset because he's like, Mike, watch this, and he had like this guy moving around shooting things. So I'm like, oh, okay, well, FPS has to be multiplayer. And he's like, oh, okay. And he clicks the make multiplayer button. Why is that a thing? Oh, look, I did it. It's easy.
Unreal is very interesting in how it empowers artists.
Make multiplayer.
So bad.
If you want to make a multiplayer FPS, use Unreal. That's the answer. It's like
I think that's right.
it's
What it
very
is.
much for that thing.
If you want to make minigames, Unity. Or Flash if you are 15 years ago.
Yeah, no.
Don't get into
don't
Flash.
You can use Hex or Hacks, and that can compile the Flash and other targets. But
Always
How
look at the
Flash things
date
do that?
on those do these tutorials.
HTML5.
If it's more than 2 or 3 years old,
Yeah, there's something better.
yeah, there's probably a better thing.
True.
All right, here's a question not for me. For those of you who play board games, which one is your favorite? Also, has the idea ever come to developing a PC board game or virtual board game that would make use of the VR technology?
First off, you don't play board games?
Not really, no.
Oh wow, that's
I know.
disappointing.
I know, it's weird. I'm sorry. I'm trying
Wow.
I like.
Well, we lost Tim.
That's pretty hard.
We down to Tim.
He might have had to go.
You can salvage it by telling him your favorite is what is it? Cones of Dunshire.
That's his favorite.
It's a
No, it's
made up
Parks and Rec.
fake board game from like the Parks and Rec
Yeah.
When he
television
comes
show.
back, I'll tell him I forgot about this one game that I really like. If he comes back, he may have just quit his job. Well,
that's
surely
terrifying.
somebody in here
He
likes
left his
board
water,
games.
so I guess that's my water.
I'm gonna drink some water. Oh, no, go ahead.
Alright. I like Secret Hitler a lot. Outside of that, I like Lords of Waterdeep.
Ooh, yeah. Have you ever played with Ryan Hall?
No.
He has this rule where you have to say intrigue when you play an intrigue card, and you have to say it like intrigue because you're all GMs, right? You have to like tell the story while you're playing.
It's
Interesting.
not, you don't,
I just play like a worker placement game. I just place workers, optimize.
Yeah, Agricola.
Agricola, I prefer Lords of Waterdeep. Agricola, you know, kicked off that worker placement stuff. It's not bad.
Power Grid.
Never played it.
I don't like Power Grid.
If D&D counts, I have played a lot of D&D, and that'll probably be at the top. If you want like a boxed board game, I think maybe Betrayal at House on the Hill. It's the one I played the most with my friends, weirdly enough.
Let's see.
Like Train.
I'm not much of a board game person, but I have played a couple of them. I think like big social ones like Codenames is pretty fun. What are some other ones?
Monopoly.
No, not
Yeah.
Monopoly.
What's
Risk?
that game called? Castles of Matt King Ludwig or something?
Oh, I like that
Sounds
one.
right.
Yeah, that's a good
I
one.
also really like the Carcassonne.
Sure,
Yeah,
Carcassonne.
you're making little maps.
I guess I should give a shout out because I do play games with my kids, and two that we really like currently are Mr. Toast, which is a card game. I don't know if anyone's heard of it. It was a Kickstarter game. It's fun, and we also like Zombie Dice a lot.
Zombie dice. What's your favorite board game?
Me? Yeah. That's a good question.
Mr. Toast? I came up with one, Tim.
Mr. Toast.
Mr. Toast.
Oh boy. I've played so many. Recently, a game that I had a lot of fun playing. I won't say it's my favorite because I don't have time to make that judgment call. Is I played Carcassonne.
Yeah, I just said that. Too.
Oh, that was a lot of fun, and a lot of fights were came out of it. I also really like the Mad Halls of King Ludwig.
Oh,
yes.
recognized
Yeah, we already took all yours. Sorry.
Dang it! Those are good.
Tim, you like Formula D, right?
I'm in the boat of having far too many to count, so I've been trying to like isolate a useful one. Probably of all time, I'm not actually allowed to say this out loud, but diplomacy, which is forbidden.
I heard this morning that it is forbidden in
It
the
is
studio.
forbidden.
No, you're allowed to like it. You just can't play it here.
What's
yourself.
It's verboten.
It's like catnip. You're dangling forbidden things in front of people. More recently, probably Innovation, which is a very excellent little, very elegant card game that gets tremendous amounts of the Age of Civilizations feel to it, while being very mechanically sound, unlike most kind of big expansion 4X builder games. So very deep. And has anybody come up with virtual reality board games? Yes,
Yeah.
several people.
Yeah.
We've
Tried.
prototyped some of it, and there are people looking to bring that to market today. So
Tabletop Simulator already supports VR. You can buy it on Steam for $20.
It's not
Whoa!
It doesn't
All right, this
support-
isn't like free advertising for them, all right?
Doesn't
are you part of their affiliate program?
No, it supports the hands.
Oh, since when?
I don't know, but I saw videos of people with hands.
I heard it wasn't. I heard it wasn't great.
Yeah, there's probably jank. There's always jank.
It is going to the dark.
Motion controls with jank? Oh,
What?
yes, my monocle.
Whoa! You can buy a modern monocle,
Why
by
would
the
you,
way.
though?
Can
I
you
don't know.
buy two of them?
If you have one really bad eye. Probably.
Oh, I'm all for
All right,
that.
we have actually caught up. This is our last question.
What?
Yeah.
Last
You
question.
stopped. You stopped.
I kind of
He
love
stopped
one of
writing
those
them down.
loops that like you can just have the hinged lens, and at a certain moments you're like, flick it into place.
To look at something
That would be
closer.
Really cool.
Isn't there someone like that, like a villain in Hellboy movie that has something like that?
It's a very villainous. It's a very precise thing. It's like got a lot of artistic connotations there.
Shield that would come down. Very mysterious what it was
But it's
for.
just like jewelers or watchmakers.
Yeah, like a jeweler's
Watchmakers,
loop.
that's
Yeah,
what-
watchmaker's loop.
So you got to look at those, the purity.
Morpheus had those news pinch glasses.
Yeah, those are cool. So did Teddy Roosevelt.
This is crooked, this
It's 0:30.
All right, last question.
What's the question?
Despite how agonizing programming can be, do you still like programming? What are some
Sorry.
tips on handling frustrating situations such as finding many bugs within your programs?
I swear at my computer
just-
loudly and frequently.
He does. I can hear it at my desk.
Yeah,
He sits 2 rows away from me now.
And he wears giant headphones all the time.
You just program it perfectly the first time. There's no bugs.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
and then you
but-
love it still.
Yeah, I can do
He's
that.
so good at it.
But then there's a memory leak in how Unity handles audio files, and like it takes me a week and a half to find that, and I just have to update Unity like during QA. Like
Unity's
that's
Really good.
there's a lot of loud swearing that happens there.
So yeah, swearing, and it's been proven that swearing helps. Helps you cope. Go ahead and swear.
Strawberry and watermelon?
If you.
That's crazy.
Just non sequiturs. You have to have a sense of humor about these things.
Also
One of
true.
my one of my favorite game developers of all time has a quote, and I'll look it up so I can close the stream with it. But if you can't take a joke, you shouldn't have gotten into game development, right? Like, there's always something hilariously awful going on.
It's true. Bugs make things really, really funny. Like when you are doing stuff in VR and you're like, the world doesn't actually behave like that, but I'm in a funny computer simulation where the rules don't matter and I'm making them up as I go along. It's intrinsically funny.
So you still like
programming's
programming?
at its worst
No.
when it's tedious, not when it's difficult.
Yeah,
That's true.
That's absolutely true. Yeah, for sure.
Programmers like challenges. That's why they got into programming.
I think programming is at its worst when the bug is only reproducible in a release build on the device.
Yeah. Platform specific bugs.
We have a thing where we can't do debug builds on one of our platforms right now. We can only do production builds, and that's bad. That is a bug that we need to fix.
Yeah, that's rough.
Or when your bug is like, oh, it only happens on Qualcomm processors. Used to have.
Stupid
I had a
Snapdragons.
project like that.
Or you work forever to find a bug, but then it just somehow fixes itself, and you're like, oh, I guess that's good.
Every bug is a funny anecdote in the future.
Nice.
That's
Lee-
another thing to think about.
Mike Lee had a funny anecdote about how color processing was handled differently by iPad and Android cameras. So vision tech became a fun, interesting problem that
Laughable.
eventually became a funny anecdote.
Yeah.
I've never heard him laugh about that.
Start over from scratch.
Well, no, the thing isn't funny for you, it's funny for the other people when you tell them about.
When you tell
how
the story about your
painful it
pain,
was.
Schadenfreude.
How you
I have
overcame it.
We're like clowns.
I have lots
Yeah.
of funny bug stories.
So how do you
Yeah.
handle frustrating situations?
Take
As a
break.
programmer.
You take a break.
Yes.
Seriously, you take a break.
Yeah,
you,
go on a
you
walk.
go home and you sleep. And
Stand
you come
up,
back and
walk, flip your pen a
maybe
bunch.
you dreamt of the answer. Like, you take breaks.
Take
Give yourself-
breaks.
Give yourself space.
Take a nap, come back to it tomorrow.
Absolutely.
Diversity of perspective shifts. Like, I've been telling designers to adopt the practice of rubber ducking, like telling your problem out loud to just like an inanimate object like a rubber duck.
Sure.
Because getting your mind to think about the problem in a very different way will jog those creative juices. And sometimes you just have to let your subconscious dwell on it. Shower thoughts, real thing.
Yeah.
Real thing.
Yeah,
I
take
just
a
thought the
long
walk was
shower and
kinda
go to
weird,
bed.
but I get it now. He talks to himself on purpose.
You articulate the problem, which allows you to see things that your brain is otherwise hiding from you.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many times someone has called me over and just like, I can't figure this out. Let me explain it to you. And then they're just like, oh, and it actually just be like this. I actually didn't need you for anything.
They didn't need you. They
You
needed a
did,
sounding
and you
board.
needed to talk it out, and
Yeah.
like, and me showing up made you do that. So like, that's, you know, it could have been anybody, but
I found that quote I wanted to quote because it's an awesome quote. I always quote it.
cool. Yeah.
This is from Jeff Vogel, independent game developer. When you write a game, you have in your mind a spectacular, glorious, golden image of how it will end up. And when your game is done, it will be a lowly, misbegotten thing, lumpy and misshapen, a foul parody of your original goal. I'm like, that's the best single line quote about game development
That's
I've
awesome.
ever heard.
So don't get into games unless you're okay with making trash.
Perfect. Thank you.
Because your ideas, I can't insult people.
You've got great ideas, and I'm sure you've got all of the skills to execute it. You just need to find the motivation. Or whatever. I don't know.
That's so positive.
Too hot.
There will be plenty of people in this world who will tell you that your stuff is trash, and they won't always be wrong.
I thought you were going to say they won't always be right. Sometimes they will be wrong.
It's implied that they're not always right, right? Yeah. That's true.
But swearing at computers works.
Yeah, swear more, sleep more.
But don't throw your computer. That never helps.
Don't break it.
Ever.
Yeah.
My
I've
phone
never
broke.
done it, but I know people who do.
My
You
phone
haven't?
broke and I slapped it, and then the screen started working again, but it was still really broken. So
You haven't gotten the OS upgrade? Rubberizes the monitor?
I haven't. I'm last on the list.
I guess as general advice,
Oh.
if you're gonna make anything in any creative endeavor, you're gonna make a lot of bad stuff to start out with.
Yeah.
And you have to get through the bad stuff to get to the good stuff.
Everybody has 200 shitty games inside of them. You just get them out of the way, and you're golden.
Yeah. Except you still have to sell those games, I guess.
Well, practice makes
You can
perfect.
try.
General rule. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's fair. I mean, it's great. Like, don't be afraid to go out and make crap. Because that's how you learn.
You can put it out there,
Garbage.
and then when you think it's actually good, then you can actually put it out there.
and then people will tell you how wrong you are, and you're
Yeah,
right.
people will play your garbage and tell you it's garbage. You get used to
And
having
you
your
go,
feelings
I know.
hurt. That's
Yeah,
good
you
for
feel
you
like
too.
you-
I knew it was garbage. That's why I put it out.
Build up your skin.
Yeah.
Who said that quote? Jeff Vogel?
Yeah. There's gonna be quite a few people who walk away from this stream thinking, Schell Games talks a lot about making crap. That's very awkward.
I
We don't release the crap.
This
We
is
don't
real, though.
keep
That's
the
real,
crap
though, right?
inside.
Like, we make a lot of crap and we throw
Jeff
a lot of crap
Vogel.
away. Be ready to make crap and throw your crap out. Like that's I think that's really solid advice.
It's true.
You gotta flush it out.
Yeah, that's right. You gotta flush the crap out.
You got a 6 of
Good night,
toothpicks in
everybody.
there, some
Game jams are good
cocktails
for that.
for us,
Do a lot of
like
game jams. Yeah, I don't know.
Oh, God.
All right,
video
so-
games.
I think this conversation
I
is
think we're done.
circling the drain.
Yeah, I think we're done. All right. So yeah, so cool. It's been fun, everyone. Thanks for sticking around and hanging out with us.
Yeah.
And all your great questions. I hope you've had as much fun as we've had.
Hopefully all next year.
Yeah, and we are going to try to do this every month. So hopefully we'll see
Next
you
month.
next month at some point.
Or next
Tell
year.
your friends that they should
Which is August.
come too. I don't know.
Summer's almost over.
Next month's August. That's all right.
No, I'm not prepared.
It's not August yet.
I don't know. Just
Days.
I need 2017 to not be over yet.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Kevin Humphrey. Good night. Goodbye.
Thank
Good
you everyone who
night.
asked questions, and all of y'all who listened.
Yeah.
Yay.
Yeah.